we're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new style, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's April 4th here in Seoul. I'm Shin, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Cheska Dain.
Happy Thursday, everyone.
Happy Thursday. And today we have a very special guest,
Yay!
Christopher Gao, who's actually been with us via Skype, but it's a pleasure meeting you in person. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks so much. Yeah, my name's Chris. I'm from the United States. I'm a graduate student at Seoul National University, where I'm studying international cooperation and with focus on North Korea and Korean Peninsula security issues. So.
All right, and that's a great hint to today's episode, which we'll be elaborating soon. But both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Now, the first story. The day many Koreans did not want to come has finally arrived. On Wednesday, the country's beloved panda celebrity Fu Bao left for China. Earlier in the morning, before Fu Bao was transferred to her vibration-free cage en route to Incheon International Airport, she did get to see fans for 20 minutes inside a van. Fans greeted Fu Bao at Everland theme park, where she was born and raised. Her dedicated zookeeper, Kang Cheon, more well known as Halbuji, as he's like a gentle grandfather to the giant panda cub, also boarded the plane with Fu Bao. Moving on, Taiwan was hit by the strongest earthquake in 25 years on Wednesday. The tremors reached a reported 7.4 magnitude, shaking the island's eastern coast and bringing down multiple buildings. Landslides killed at least 4 people. The quake hit the island at around 7:58 local time, leading to tsunami warnings in southern Japan and the Philippines. Earlier this week, South Korea unveiled the KTX Tong Benefits, and this is a new class of bullet train that boasts a maximum speed of 320 kilometers per hour. Operations are scheduled for May, and the train is set to operate 4 times a day between Seoul and Busan. What would usually take more than 3 hours from the capital to the popular port city has now been reduced to 2 hours and 10 minutes. The train also will operate twice between Seoul and Gwangju City, located in the southwest. It will only take around an hour and a half to get there, and President Yoon Suk-yeol has promised to quickly boost the National Railway Speed-Up project for residents in rural areas to easily get to the capital. This includes expanding routes by adding new destinations, which is exactly why I'd like to ask our panelists here in the studio what they think about the latest launch of the new KTX train, and what type of benefits do you think this will bring about, especially for the younger generation?
Right. So there's been a couple exciting developments in terms of rail in South Korea in the past week. Of course, we had the GTX A line that was debuted. I rode that on the first day. It was super exciting.
Right.
And then I was also super excited to hear about this new KTX variant announced. So being able to get to Busan 30% faster, I mean, everyone obviously is going to benefit a lot from that. In terms of the benefits for the younger generation, obviously those that are living in the southern regions, just being able to get to Seoul faster, you know, let's say they're attending school there, get back and forth between their school, makes a lot of sense. I would also add to that, as an American, I think a lot of our young generations are coming to South Korea these days, either as exchange students or on a foreign trip or something. So I think exposing them to this kind of high-speed rail technology and seeing what an advanced country is like and that moves their people like this, because we're severely lacking in that category in America. We have very little high-speed rail built out. So yeah, that's a good effect that could come from this.
Hopefully more international visitors coming to Korea might look at our transport system and they can blueprint off of it. Now, what do you think about this story?
I can absolutely attest to Christopher's testimonial about the United States. I would love to see more bullet trains in America as well. But on top of that, I think I'm one of the many millennials and Gen Z that have families in these rural parts, and having this high-speed railway would definitely enhance and alleviate the tension that happens during holidays as well, when literally the entire nation is moving to meet their parents or families outside of Seoul, right? And on top of that, especially talking about the density of population and demographic problems here happening in Seoul, it would be nice to have bullet trains that will sort of disperse so much density and focus on just Seoul City and be able to travel easily and quickly.
Exactly, and hopefully we'll see more developments. As the president mentioned, we are going to see much more developments happen coming forth, especially with the National Speed Up Railway project now rolling. Now, switching gears to our main discussion topic of the day. Earlier this month, the Unification Ministry conducted a survey on around 74,000 students asking them whether they think unification between the two Koreas is necessary. Less than half thought it was. And these survey results are gaining more attention as we've seen tensions mount on the Korean peninsula. Just yesterday, North Korea claimed to have successfully launched a new intermediate-range ballistic missile tipped with a hypersonic warhead. It also said that all of the country's developed missiles are now solid fuel and nuclear capable. So as much as we're seeing a lot of tension build up in regards to inter-Korea relations, we've seen these survey results pointing to the younger generation being a bit nonchalant about reunification, right?
Right, absolutely. Let's take a look at the screen to see the actual figures. Now, this survey was conducted over 756 schools and had about 74,000 students from elementary to high school. Now, last year was actually the first time that less than half of the people thought that unification was important. And almost 40%, as you can see from the screen, of the students responded that they actually found it unnecessary. Now, there has been studies that have been being conducted year by year from 2014, and the level of indifference to reunification is increasing, and therefore the ministry responded that the military threats could have had effect on shaping people's opinion on having more negative perception of the North and will work to ameliorate the tension. But at least according to the series of surveys, it's quite obvious that there was a decrease in the interest of reunification as generations are passing.
And I think it's now worth noting, to speaking on behalf of the younger generation out there, Chris, why do you think a growing number don't really opt for reunification anymore? And we have you on today's episode because you are studying international studies with a focus in North Korea. Speaking from a semi-expert's point of view, what would you think about this situation?
Right. So yeah, I have had a lot of conversations with my peers, both at school and just on a personal basis, people around my age in South Korea, in terms of what do they think about a reunification. And I would say a kind of recurring sentiment that I hear pretty frequently is that a lot of these people essentially, they don't feel any connection to North Korea anymore. They don't have those relatives that maybe the older generation still had memories of that live in North Korea. I think a lot of the younger generations are also concerned about the financial burden that can be incurred by South Korea if suddenly they needed to bring up the North Korean region up to the same living standard as South Korea in one of those reunification scenarios. I would say that in my kind of personal research on this issue, I think there are quite a lot of long-term benefits to reunification that I think people should keep in mind. So of course, like a lot of the investments that go to North Korea in terms of revitalizing that country in a reunification scenario, those are going to be spearheaded by South Korean conglomerates, and also they'll be working with South Korean construction firms. So ultimately, a lot of these investments will be returning to South Korea. And I think there was some Goldman Sachs reports a while back which showed that a reunified peninsula would be able to surpass, the economies of Germany and Japan within a few decades after that. So I think there's incredible opportunities in terms of the untapped labor in North Korea, as well as rare earth materials, other resources like that can be taken advantage of. So yeah, these are the types of things I think people should consider, not only the short-term kind of growing pains.
I think you really shed light to an important aspect there. I think people should take a look at the economic benefits that can come forth with reunification. But nonetheless, it's not like all young people out there are studying North Korean studies like yourself. So maybe that's why they didn't really have a general idea as to what the benefits could be. But apart from that reason, why do you think a lot of younger people aren't really rooting for or aren't prioritizing reunification on top of their list?
It's a really interesting question, and I just want to kind of say I am of the less than 0.5%. They would still find the reunification quite necessary and important. But I think as Christopher mentioned, one thing that I think we need to keep in mind is not just the economic benefits, but there are rippling benefits to having a national security, whether it be economic stability. But I would also like to point out many, many humanitarian issues that are happening right now,
For sure.
including but not limited to having divided families. However, I understand that the insurmountable gap between the two, whether it be the socio-cultural and the socio-economic development, does make us think about the steps that we would have to take to become one country. I mean, after all, even the language that we speak, sometimes we get the lingos confused. And on top of that, there are so many quote-unquote real and tangible problems that are happening in our life right now that I think people find it so distant. And not to mention North, as Yeon mentioned, flexing its military arsenals from time to time, I think it only exacerbates the negative connotation. And if I may add, I think there has been a lot of studies and reports about the Millennials and Gen Z not going through the war, and that is why there is so much indifference and not understanding the tragedy. I do understand that we have not experienced the tragedy itself. However, if you look at the studies, I think millennials and Gen Z are more sensitive to a lot of the global issues, especially when it comes to humanitarian crisis. But I think in terms of the North, it is more about eliminating the negative rather than adding the positive that we're focusing on. That makes it seem so distant and sort of counterintuitive, I believe.
And I'm happy to hear, Cheska, that you're on the side of actually opting for reunification, whether it be for humanitarian issues or whether to reunite families that have been divided. And as much as this is a contentious issue, there's so many different surrounding arguments, we asked our viewers what they think about unification between the two Koreas, and they all had different opinions. If you take a look at the screen, you can find out what 3 of them had to share with us. And we're going to be starting with Yuret In. Yuret In says, I hope it happens soon. My harmony from Busan has relatives in the north she never got to see again. I would love to meet them for her. Benny said, for me, if both North and South unify, we can really be reminded that it can help to further understand the relations of both countries regardless of their issues. Leon says, while I think there is a desire for reunification, there are a mix of emotions regarding the issue. Some view it as a long-term goal, while others are concerned about the economic and social costs. Despite the challenges, I am glad that there are ongoing efforts to promote inter-Korean dialogue and cooperation. And we're now going to use this time to include an expert to better analyze how the younger generation's perceptions of unification can affect inter-Korean relations both in the short term and long run. We're now going to include an inter-Korea relations and unification-related expert in our talks. It's Dong-hyuk David Shin, the program manager from UniKorea Foundation, an organization founded in May of 2015 to better prepare for Korean unification through peace and reconciliation. Welcome, Dong-hyuk.
Hello, thanks for having me.
All right, pleasure to have you. Now, Dong-hyuk, as the program manager of UniKorea Foundation, what do you think about the latest survey results we've been talking about so far, seeing a growing number of younger people from our generation not really want unification?
Disappointing, but expected. This is a disappointing finding, yet the survey has a silver lining. The survey was conducted under the Unification Education Support Act, which encourages a fact-finding survey on the unification education of elementary and secondary students as presidential decree prescribes. I hope this fact-finding alarms those who hope for and work toward the unification of the peninsula, so we do it differently. The results aren't surprising. The survey result also shows yearly declining trend, and I'm sure the policymakers, experts, professionals in the sector, and parents all knew that the students' disinterest has been growing. The Unification Ministry analyzed that North Korea's provocation have fueled students' negative views on unification. Although the negative environment contributed by North Korea is a true and major contributing factor, however, we need to concentrate on what we can control and re-examine the reality of unification education. I know that many government and civilian actors have diligently worked to promote unification education, but we have been doing the same thing and hoped for different results. So most of the unification education in public schools is on the subject of history and ethics, and the lessons are short, simple introduction lectures. This is insufficient, and emerging generation is not interested in engaging in what seems irrelevant to their daily lives and what they think they can't change. The students are busy trying to get into good colleges, learning English, so unification effort needs to be more exciting and meaningful to match those needs that seem more immediate. At UniKorea Foundation, we started UniFesta 2 years ago, where the youth and young adults can participate in activities and dialogues in 2 weeks long unification festival, so we can share tangible ownership of the unification making. In those programs, we learned that garnering interest of the youth is more difficult than ever. Still, we'll continue to explore the practice unification preparation activities that youth would want to participate that can change the disinterest. The drop in the rate of students supporting unification to below 50% could be a negative tipping point, or merely a new baseline for changes for those who hope for unification.
I love the term that you use, having this tangible ownership, because as you mentioned, our generation definitely haven't gone through the war, so it's very easy to lose that kind of ownership. So what do you think is some things that needs to be done to better raise awareness of the need for reunification between the two Koreas?
Continuity is the key. The Korean public is fatigued by prolonged and multifaceted North Korean problems.
Right.
The unification issue has been politicized, and there seem to be minimal near-term solutions. Unification and inter-Korea policies and discourse have been subject to major fluctuations in each administration's changes. Therefore, creating national consensus and sustainable interest has been impossible. Cooperation with the National Assembly is crucial to avoid unilateral declaration by the executive branch. It is through cooperation with the National Assembly that a liberal democratic unification discourse with the voices of the people can be developed, and this process can provide a basis for consistent discourse regardless of the administration change. The unification plan for one national community in 1989 was nonpartisan and it served a good purpose. Now experts see that the content is not detailed enough and doesn't reflect the changed environment, so Yoon administration is trying to upgrade the plan and announce it on the Independence Day. The new unification vision needs to be nonpartisan in order to be able to listen to the opinions of various citizens and create a discourse that captures the future of a unified Korea based on liberal democracy. UniKorea understands that the aforementioned process is not easy, so we try to create continuity in the civilian sector. We support NGOs, researchers, activists, North Korean defectors, and youth. So the awareness-raising campaigns and unification preparation retain continuity and are less affected by administration changes.
So expanding the outlets for open dialogue amongst the public seems to be the way that you guys are going for. Now, Christopher, would you like to ask the last question?
Sure, and I'd also like to add, I think that's a really crucial point about the domestic polarized environment being a major impediment to any kind of continuity in terms of the long-term strategy. And so my question would be, is there any diplomatic breakthrough you'd like to see in regards to Korean relations?
The inter-Korean relations and geopolitical environment in the Indo-Pacific region is really complex. I understand that the question is about the diplomatic breakthrough, but I'd like to focus on the people of the South and the North. The inter-Korean agreement from the top level is important. The support of international community is indispensable. Yet in the end, I want us to remember that the people of the South and North are the biggest drivers of reunification. If the people of Korean Peninsula wants unification, the leaders of the Korean Peninsula will have to work for unification. Internationally, if the Korean people collectively want to reunify, then the neighboring countries will have to make a calculation. Now that we see that reunification has become a popular consensus and is something that Korean people aspire to, and if we oppose it hastily, we will be at odds that the reunified Korea and the people of the reunified Korea, when it happens. So it's better to weigh the cost and respect the will of the Korean people and work with them. And I think that's the great asset that we can build.
I think it is the basic foundation, getting people on board, whether it be both in South Korea and North Korea, letting them know that this is needed is key. Thank you so much, Dong-hyuk. It was a pleasure hearing from you today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And as Dong-hyuk mentioned, I do think diplomatic breakthroughs are important. We need to see better peace in the peninsula. But what's even more important is that in order for unification to actually be considered, people from our generation need to be on board. Then what is left for our generation to consider for this better inter-Korea relations to come forth?
You know, to quote Dong-hyuk, I think the term they used was tangible ownership. As you mentioned, it has to be driven by the people and for the people. So I think, you know, being able to own something and see the tangible results of it and the benefits of it, I think is very important. I think that's where education kind of comes in. But education more in terms of understanding that the accumulation of the past is our present and the future, and the fact that therefore understanding issues such as divided families, humanitarian issues, whether it be economic benefits, are all important. But now there should be an added element of education about the tangible benefits
Yes.
of reunification. So focusing on the positives rather than trying to eliminate the negative or shy away from something, so that it's not just a simple responsibility that was, it befallen upon us to take care of. Yeah.
And I think there needs to be a will to want that unification.
Right.
And in order for that will to be formed, more access to accurate information out there is
very true,
necessary.
yeah.
What about you, Christopher?
Yeah, I absolutely think that as the participant mentioned, I think we need to have more consistency in the reunification education. So isolating that education and the content, especially in the textbooks, from fluctuations in political regimes, I think is going to be key going forward. And I think, like we mentioned earlier, definitely highlighting the tangible benefits and kind of recharacterizing reunification away from this kind of vague conception that might be hard to grapple with as a young person, and really focusing on those long-term tangible benefits that I think a lot of people would be excited about, and framing it that way could do a lot to improve these numbers, I would say.
And I think our generation could lead this trend because, as you guys both mentioned, we are the generation where we're quite savvy as to knowing what's happening around the world. We're quite attentive
And very active.
Very active. And at the end of the day, because we prioritize humanitarian issues, understanding that reunification is not only about the political and economic benefits, but it can reap benefits for the people, is something that can motivate us to better understand this issue. And hopefully more discussions will come forth. Now, in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics people are talking about. Special thanks to Cheska Dainhong
Pleasure's always mine, thank you.
and Christopher Gao.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.
Go